In 1915, 28 men faced certain death in Antarctica. Their ship was crushed. Their location unknown. Their chances of rescue, zero. But their captain had a unique leadership method. Here's how one man kept his crew alive for 2 years in a frozen hell. Okay, so check this out. In the year of 1915, when the world was consumed by war and chaos, 28 men faced another kind of battle, a slow death on the coldest, remorseless edge of the earth. Antarctica, the final uncharted wilderness, stretched before them, alien, eternal, and indifferent. Their ship, the proud and aptly named Endurance, had carried a grand dream across the seas, a crossing of the frozen continent, 1,800 miles of white void. But the dream had shattered the moment the ice began to close its jaws. This is not the story of glory, not the smooth, triumphant kind of tale polished by time or gilded in textbooks. This is the story of survival. The ice came for them like some ancient, patient predator. Slow at first, deceptive even, like winter's embrace curling around the hull. But then it showed its true form, a grinding, unrelenting force. Beneath an indifferent gray sky, the ice pressed and tore Endurance. The ship, a solid vessel of oak and iron ribs, built to defy seas, might as well have been a tin can in the claws of a god. The pressure was so immense it lifted the 350-ton bulk entirely out of the water. Shackleton, their captain, stood watching as his floating fortress, a home for 10 months, splintered around them. The ship moaned, wood screamed, and the cold took possession of their dreams. The men froze, their breath billowing out like ghosts in the air. Shackleton's voice did not waver when he turned to his weary crew and said, simply, "What the ice gets, the ice keeps." It was a eulogy for the Endurance and a promise. They would find another way. The captain told them so, and Shackleton was not a man to lie. They were adrift now, not on water, but on a frozen wasteland of shifting, creaking ice. Stranded 1,200 miles from civilization. The temperature plunged to -50 degrees Fahrenheit, and no beacon flickered deep in the distance. No radios hummed. No rescue ships sliced through the brutal waters. The horizon was an endless, unbroken line where the world's colors had drained bleached white, gray, and black. The kind of death that could creep into your bones without you realizing. Leadership, in times like these, was no small thing. Most would have shattered beneath the ancient indifference of the frozen abyss, like the Endurance itself. Shackleton, though, Shackleton was different. Where others would have cracked, he became stronger. Where most might have seen an impossible task, Shackleton found a rhythm. Shackleton understood that men are made of more than flesh, sinew, and will. Survival was half a battle of the body, half a labyrinth of the mind. He stared into the void and found a strategy. First, he reorganized their fragile world. He mixed the bunks, rotated the sleeping arrangements, and split good friends apart. No cliques, no festering resentments. Shackleton made sure to share his tent with the pessimists, the loudest, bitterest complainers. If negativity lived too close to his men, it might kill them faster than frostbite. He passed around extra rations to those who looked shaken, lost, or raw with despair. Most importantly, he gave them structure. Even here, in all this nothingness, there was routine. Work to be done, birthdays to celebrate. And always, Shackleton was there, quietly, unshakably present. He didn't glow like a king or thunder like a god. He was simply there, always working beside his men, always carrying the heaviest weight just slightly ahead of them. A linchpin in the machinery of their unlikely survival. For 5 long months, the men dragged lifeboats across the ice in an act of absurd defiance. Most would have called it futile, boats on a solid frozen plain, as if some cosmic joke had been played. But Shackleton's men learned to silence those thoughts. They pulled, hands bloodied, faces raw, through storms that howled like something alive. Until, at last, after half a year of impossible labor, the ice broke, and water spewed forth a path. It was freedom, but not salvation. Ahead of them lay the most dangerous waters on earth. Shackleton had studied the faces of the men, and he knew what they all knew but could not say. Lingering long on Elephant Island, the jagged scrap of rock they'd clawed their way toward, was no salvation either. It wasn't safety. It was a slow death, one born less of violence and more of empty waiting. Shackleton told them as much. Then, with 5 men, he took one of their lifeboats and sailed. The sea rose around them like a leviathan, waves 40, 50, 60 feet tall, battering their fragile 22-foot boat. There was no monster here, tempting and roaring like in myths, but the sea was crueler than any monster. It killed by slow attrition, freezing their skin until it cracked, shaking their bones until they broke. They had no maps, only a handheld sextant, and too many degrees of wrong to make things worse. Still, Shackleton's voice came steady. "Hold fast," he told his men. And they did. For 15 days they sailed through freezing hell. And then, there it was. South Georgia Island's shadow, rising from the sea. The crew cheered, or they might have, if exhaustion hadn't consumed them. But it wasn't over. The land betrayed them, too. They arrived not at the place of help, but on the wrong side of the island. The whaling station they sought sat just out of reach, beyond uncharted mountains, jagged ice, and glaciers stacked like malicious teeth. Shackleton led the way nonetheless. Nothing about this march was kind. No proper gear, no map, no comforts. For 36 hours they marched. A journey so harsh the mind would rebel at describing it. The kind of story that only feels real because it happened. Finally, they arrived. Help was given, and Shackleton returned, after 4 rescue attempts and 4.5 months, to Elephant Island. As the final rescue boat approached the dead gray shore, Shackleton stood at its prow. The world for a moment seemed to quiet, as if it, too, was waiting for him to count. 1, 2, and then 20, 22. All 22 men waved frantically from the rock. Not one had been lost. Shackleton had done what should have been impossible. The void had tried to swallow him, but he had brought his crew through the unnameable, unspeakable cold and darkness. 100 years later, amid the noise and rush of a world infinitely more connected, but just as unsure, Shackleton's story still speaks. It's a story as cold as the Antarctic wind, but it burns with a quiet fire. The fire of leadership, of hope born in impossible circumstances. And that fire is as timeless as the stars. Because Shackleton was never leading men across ice. He was leading them through despair. And that was a harder expedition by far.